for anybody who's going to be watching the recording that we post on the website. So just take a few minutes and just welcome everybody again. This workshop is Feeling Connected While Apart. We're building community while teaching virtually. So we're going to talk about all these different ways that we can really connect with each other. I'd like to go ahead and start off by introductions. I'm going to go ahead and put myself in there as well, just to say hello. So you probably won't be able to see this in recording, but my name is Jennifer, and I am the online teaching coordinator here at NIU University. And we are excited to be able to be offering these workshops and just kind of helping you as you're transitioning to remote teaching. So I would love to hear from you guys as well. So if you want to do maybe the microphone, or if you want to type in a text chat, go ahead and tell us your department, where you're joining us from, and maybe a question that you have about creating faculty events. So you can go ahead and go to that little chat bubble in the Collaborate menu and go from there. Your department and where you are usually takes a little bit to type. So hi, Melissa. I'm glad you're joining us, coming from home. I think most of us are doing that somewhere where we're working remotely with that. So I'm going to go ahead and move on. You guys can keep doing that in the text chat just to introduce yourselves. But I just wanted to talk a little bit is this online courses can create a sense of isolation. I think even more so in these circumstances where we are at a stay in place or shelter in place type of order, and we're having, there's different kinds of connection because we're not being able to go out. So even in a normal online class, students have connections with people in different ways outside of the environment, outside of the school environment. In this case, I think we might all start to feel that little bit of isolation. And so, Chris, yeah, thank you. We're going to talk about some of the ways that we can create that feeling of community among the students. So that's a great question. It's one of the topics we'll be covering today. So just like I think with us in our teaching, we can feel a little isolated, our students can too. So we look at how do we create that virtual community with students. And students are more likely to, I'm having some problems with my mouse, so I'm switching over to my trackpad. Students are more likely to persist in an online course, of course, when there is virtual community, when we have relationship, when they know that there are people behind the screen, behind what's being typed and shared. So today we're going to talk about presence, what exactly it is, how do we define presence, and we're looking at why presence is important. And we're going to talk about 3 different areas of presence. We build our instructor presence, how do we build social presence, that's between the students and between the students and us, and also cognitive presence, how do we create that learning community. And this is all going to be taken through that lens of teaching remotely in times of disruption. So this is not a typical situation, and so we are going to be going through that and just seeing like how do we do this and how do we do this quickly and in the middle of the semester. So as you go through, you'll see I'm adapting some stuff just to talk about this kind of pickup in the middle where we're going to create this community after we've had that face-to-face course. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is what is presence and why is it important? And that is, and I think you guys have kind of already hit on it with some of your questions, this idea of how do we make those connections with students and staying connected. And Teresa, I think you bring up a good question is how do you read nonverbals online? And it's true, when you are online, you have not as many communication channels to connect with students. So sometimes when we're in a situation like this, in this Collaborate session, if everybody was sharing their video, we'd see that a lot. But one of the things that's important is how our tone is, because we're going to end up doing writing. And if we can do a little bit of video, we can help create that additional channel. But there's not as much two-way communication. So we don't get to see the unfortunately, we don't always get to see those nonverbals a lot. And so we do little things in other ways, even double checking the tone of our writing to make sure it's not coming across too firm, because students won't be able to see our faces, what that is. Also, sometimes using emojis and things. It's not something we typically would do. It's not necessarily professional writing, but being able to do that just like we were in class and having a casual conversation, we can add some meaning to our written like that. And also, like I said, we can use video to see that. So presence is that sharing of perspectives, that we are able to, it's not just a one-sided conversation. It's just not a one-sided connection, but people are sharing perspectives, both the faculty member to the students to the faculty, and the students with each other. And we really work to construct meaning through communication. So whatever communication channel we're working through, we're really trying to kind of push past the surface answers and understand what's happening in our courses and understand that content. And then just really establishing learners and the instructor as individuals, the faculty member as an individual, that we have our own personalities and they can come through. It doesn't have to be this sterile environment. And by doing that, we can establish those trust and relationships. Now, the good thing is a lot of you, unless you're starting one of those midterm courses, those 8-week courses, a lot of you have already done this in your face-to-face classes. So you've kind of got some momentum behind you as you're moving into the online environment, that the students know you, they know your personality a little bit, and there's just ways that you can reinforce that in the online environment. So as we're looking at this, we're going to actually look at 3 different forms of presence. We're going to talk about the instructor presence, and that is how you, this is a model called of community inquiry, and that is how you can make your presence known and make your personality show, and how you can be known in the course. We also want to create opportunities for social presence, and that is for our students to connect with each other, and also for them to connect with us. And then finally, we're looking at that cognitive presence and how that learning takes place. So where you see these intersect is kind of some ways that we can foster that environment. So the instructor connects with the social presence of the students by really setting the climate and the tone of the course. With the social presence and cognitive presence, the students are interacting with the content and the material in the course. We are fostering an environment that supports discourse, that people can discuss and share their perspectives and understand that we're all coming from these multiple ideas and thoughts that we're bringing in, and it all has different shades of meaning based on our own circumstances. And so we can talk about that and provide opportunities for students to learn in that way. And then with that cognitive presence and the instructor presence, it's about how we kind of select and format and share our content, that information that's coming across. Now, the good thing is, in a lot of ways, I mean, of course, you've got a lot of that material already. The challenge is how do you translate that material online? And we'll talk about that. So with this, we're going to talk a little bit of those methods for establishing instructor presence. How do we make ourselves known in the course? And there's just kind of some simple ways that we can do that, even just starting out. So I would say one of the ideas would be to reintroduce yourself and adapt it to our current situation. So you guys have already gone through, the faculty introductions, but maybe what would be nice is kind of saying, okay, here's where I'm at. So a lot of you are at your home. Maybe you've got like a home office area. Maybe you've adapted your kitchen table or your dining room table for your office now. So there's some ways that you can just kind of make students feel comfortable and understand that you're in a similar boat as them as you're working to find places to focus and connect with the work that you're doing. One of the important things, whether you're introducing yourself for the first time or if you are working to reintroduce yourself now. So I've borrowed this from Stephanie Richter, who is the director of faculty development. So in her courses, she makes sure that that contact information is really easy to find. It's just easy to connect, so students know you're there. So students know that you aren't going to ghost them, that you're going to be connected with them. Be prepared, of course, for more questions, whether that comes in through email or if you have your cell phone, if you have some app that you're using for text. Those can all be ways that you can connect, but you just want to make sure that you have that contact information for an easy to find spot. With this, what we talk about in online courses that we've planned and been able to have time to go through is maybe even doing a video introduction. It could be a spot on campus or in your office or wherever, just to let them know a little bit about you and how you feel about this course. For adapting it to our current situation, maybe take a picture. There's a lot of things on social media now that everybody is taking pictures of their home offices and what their new office looks like and sharing that. It's perfectly valid to share with students. We don't want to necessarily share really intimate details, but sharing some of those personal things helps them see how we're adapting to this situation, how we're coping, and also just kind of gives them another channel to get to know us. So maybe do that, or maybe even take an introduction video about your work at home space and talk a little bit about the changes you've made to the course for this teaching remotely and learning remotely situation. And then finally, I'm adding a little bit of my flair in there. So I don't know if you've seen on social media some of the talking about descriptions of what your coworkers are doing to kind of wreak havoc right now. So, you may not want to share pictures of your family, but maybe your pets. You can kind of talk about, the situations of what they're doing. For like my cat will snore sometimes, and I think it's unfair that she gets to sleep while I'm working. And my puppy likes to steal shoes. So it's all these just little ways that people can kind of get to know you. Your students can kind of get to know you in a different way in this environment. Make sure you are communicating regularly. So whether this is written announcements, there's an announcement feature both in Blackboard Original Course View and in Ultra Course View, and that you're just kind of keeping up. I would make this a steady thing just so they know when to expect communication. Maybe let the students know that once a week you're going to put out that announcement. It introduces what's happening for the current week, maybe recapping some of what happened last week, keeping them updated when they're going to have feedback on their grades and on their assignments so they can move on to the next thing. So it's just something that you establish a regular schedule with that, and that they can come to rely on that. One of the things that's going to be super important in this time is just that communication. That is going to increase in all these different channels because you don't have that Tuesday, Thursday, or Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or however your class was set up to see them in class. So they're just having that regular communication and knowing when to expect that will be really helpful for students. You can also, if you're not, you may not want to do the written assignments, you can do quick video announcements. So again, that makes you more human. It gives students another channel to see you. It gives that connection, so they're not just having the words on a screen, they're seeing something active and engaging in that way. And so you can do that. You don't have to look for perfection in these. So what your goal is just to kind of make sure you're communicating information. You could again use these to introduce the week, talk about a particularly exciting assignment that's coming up, maybe talk a little bit. If you're using discussion boards, you can bring out some of the highlights that you really appreciated in the discussion for that week. So there's a lot of ways that you can incorporate that. You can record in multiple ways, even just use your phones. Use your phones to record. It doesn't have to be this professionally produced thing. You can use your phones to record. You can pop it up in the news and announcements discussion board, or you can also pop it up into YouTube, provide them a link. So there's multiple ways you can do that. You want to make sure that you're captioning those. YouTube will automatically caption, and it'll be really quick because these can be 1 or 2 minute videos. They don't have to be really long. You can go and correct it really quick. You could also use something like VoiceThread or Flipgrid to make those announcements, and students could do video announcements back. And I will provide links for those a little bit later in the workshop. So another way, and if you guys have ideas too on ways that you're doing that, feel free to put that in the chat. Another way to be able to really connect with students is giving them the assignment reminders. So I know that sometimes that might feel a little like hand holding, but we've shifted a lot. Keep in mind that they have several classes that they're trying to stay on top of as well, and just helping them to keep on track really is a way that can humanize this course and really create connection with the students. So if you go into the Grade Center, you can click onto the little navigation right here, and that'll pop up this window, and you can just send them a reminder of the due dates. If you have the due dates in Blackboard with that, it'll just send them a reminder, so you don't even have to craft it yourself. You can just pop it out to them. Reach out individually too. So I know this may not be feasible in huge courses, but what I like to do is kind of just, you can even put together a little schedule for yourself or a little Excel sheet, and reach out to a few students a day, or just kind of go through just to see, how they're doing, reminding them that you are available if they have any questions or confusion about things. I think students really appreciate when they have that little bit of individual connection with their faculty member. If you notice that there's ones who are struggling or maybe having difficulty transitioning, maybe they're not in the course site as much, just popping them a quick email to say, hey, what's up? Is there something I can help you with? I noticed that you haven't been participating. I want to help you bridge that gap. Students are, of course, super appreciative of that. You are able to get to know a little bit more about their situation. Maybe there's a tech issue that they're having, and be able to connect them with resources. So that makes a big difference. Know that I think everybody, I mean, we've talked about this quite a bit, and I think everybody is in that situation where they know that you want to be flexible as to what's happening in their lives as well. So, it may be that students have tech issues. So, they may have, if you're doing a synchronous session, they may have trouble getting on and they're popping in and out a little bit. So just kind of be aware of that and know that there's some flexibility that you're just going to have to expect in this. And I already talked about that idea of being willing to do what it feels like hand holding, just maybe upping the communication more, reaching out to those students in this environment. I don't really consider that hand holding. It's just upping our communication so that students aren't lost in this big push to teach remotely. All right, and then also be available. So I already mentioned about posting contact information in a visible spot in the course, so that people are able to quickly see that and be able to reach out. Also let students to know how quickly you'll return emails and calls. I talk about this often, but I think we've all been there, that we've been waiting, we've asked some kind of question of somebody and we are waiting on an email back. And it's like we're constantly checking, we're constantly looking, we're hitting refresh, and it seems like an eternity. It could have been like 2 hours, but it seems like an eternity. And that's how our students are going to feel as well, too. So they don't have that assurity that they're going to be able to see us the next time, and touch base with us the next time they see us in class. So make sure that they have an idea, because you as much as you might want to, you also can't be on call 24/7 for this as well. So let your students know. It's usually within 24 hours for online classes, because they're usually having a lot of work to do to be able to move on to the next step. If they have a question, I don't want them stuck. So just put that somewhere so students know if somehow they've reached out to you and haven't heard back. I also tell my students that if you haven't heard back in that day, go ahead and reach out to me again. So I asked them to wait. I did have one student, and it's just kind of an example how the online freaks them out. I'm pretty good at instantly getting back, because I have my phone with me all the time. I have my email on the phone. So I kind of established a pattern with a student who just needed a little bit of extra help of getting back pretty quickly. And so when it took me a little bit longer, she had first emailed me, and then she texted me, and then she called me, all within a short space. And so, I just reminded her, I'm like, hey, I'm working. Remember, I can take up to 24 hours. And she was okay with that, but she just kind of gotten stressed was a little bit worried. She's like, I just didn't know if something happened to, because I had been so good with that. So just having that pattern and letting students know that sometimes you need a little bit more time, but for them to know that you're going to come back to them will be helpful. And then you can also conduct office hours. So if you attended, you could also watch the workshop on using breakout rooms and collaborate. That's one way that you can use office hours. You can do that online. Even if you set up phone appointments, you could post something in the course. You could use something like Doodly that they could set up appointment times during your office hours, maybe 5 or 10-minute calls. And that way, just some way to connect with you and still be open and be available to them. So this slide is just an example of if you were using the Blackboard Collaborate environment for your office hours. People come in, and I just call this we're in a main room right now, that lobby area. They can come in. I have them sign in with the chat things, so I know when they've come in, kind of first come, first serve type of thing. And then I will bring them into breakout rooms to be able to connect and talk with them. So that might be a good way to do it. Again, this isn't the only way. You can use your phone. You can use different things to be able to do that. But that's just one idea. And again, it goes back to that, your availability. I think one of the really, really important parts of this is just being able to provide that meaningful feedback, but also timely feedback. So as this is not, again, something that we have available to be able to talk in class about some of that, some of the work that we've seen or what our expectations are. So we want to make sure that even students' individual work is getting feedback, and just making sure that we're planning, like maybe the assignments that we're giving, they're very robust. Melissa, you know what? I would be fine with that. Yeah. So we'll also post a recording of this, and I'll send you a recording, but I'm happy to send the slides as well. That'd be no problem. Thank you for asking, and I'm glad it's helpful. So with this, you can do feedback right in line in Blackboard. So if you're having them turn their papers in to the Blackboard environment, you can go in there and you can make individual comments throughout their paper. You can see that here. You can also put like general feedback on everything and put the grades. That makes it a little quicker on your end as well, because it can feel a little daunting that we're not only managing all of this communication we're sending out, we're trying to think through our content we're putting online, and then we actually have to assess all the work that we're having them do. And so with that, having this is just one way that is helpful. Also using rubrics. It takes a little time to set them up front, but it makes your grading go so much quicker. And the rubrics also give feedback as to kind of what level of work. So you can use the rubrics on like specific areas that you're evaluating, and then maybe just give a general comment too. So then also setting up discussion boards. So discussion boards sometimes get a bad rap, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But if you have discussion boards in your class, being in there to kind of support that conversation and move that conversation forward is helpful for the students. So they know that you're there, and it's not just something that they're kind of in a huddle alone talking. So I had read some research that they've kind of landed being in there about 10% of the time is kind of a nice balance. So then students feel free to talk still, and they don't feel like you're taking over and they're not waiting on you. But they also have, they know that they have some guidance and some connection in there. So with that, there's different roles that you can take, whether it's prompting the conversation to move forward, whether you are encouraging them to take different perspectives and bring different perspectives into this discussion board. So as part of my follow-up email to you, I'm going to include a resource that kind of gives you some ideas on ways that you can be involved like this, and also just some helpful ideas on, kind of like mini scripts, like just ideas on what you can say, or how you can help students engage or bring maybe new meaning to something that they're posting about, paying attention to maybe a thread that's getting a lot of connection, and also making sure that you're establishing just good etiquette guidelines, that people are treating each other respectfully, they are sharing their ideas and respecting the ideas of other people. And it's not that they can't disagree, but we just do that in a respectful way. So those are all sorts of ideas on how you can establish that instructor presence. And just so it's essentially that students don't feel that you've kind of turned this into a cruise control course, that you've kind of set up all this stuff, you set the cruise control and then you just let it kind of keep on going, and they don't necessarily see the person behind it. So we want to just, all of these ways are different ways that students can really feel the faculty member in the course. So now what we're going to talk about is building culture, and that is that social presence. How do we help students connect with each other and also help connect with us? So I've already talked about some of those ideas coming through. About them connecting with us. But with social presence, it also establishes learners as individuals. So again, they see each other more than just words behind a screen. I do think it's going to be beneficial because they've already done this somewhat in class. They already have an idea who's who. I think what you might find interesting if you are using more collaborative type of assignments, these discussion boards, some of the people who may not have been as vocal in your classrooms are going to have more freedom to share their ideas. And if you set it up, there's certain requirements for certain posts, it kind of puts people on a different level of a playing field because everybody is in there and active. So you're getting even more perspectives in this. And that's one of the things that I do like about the online classroom. And doing that helps build relationships among the learners and helps them build trust. And that can just really create that sense of community where they're coming together to share their perspectives and how they're constructing what they're learning and what they're understanding. So we'll talk about the different ways we can do that as well. One of the things, again, we're kind of reintroducing ourselves in an online class where we're starting from the beginning. I always make sure I have that introduction to the students so people can tell a little bit about themselves. When I've been an online student in a couple classes, I'll sometimes go back to these discussion threads as I'm talking to somebody back and forth just so I have a better idea of who I'm talking with. So, think about, again, adapting this to this transition. Ask them to share a little bit of what their current schooling environment is like. Do they have a dedicated space? Who are their fellow students sharing with them? What are some ideas? You can ask them, what are some ideas that they have to help keep on track? Just little things to share and kind of reorient themselves. And again, this might be a really good way for students to get to know people. We get in those group norms and we come and we sit in those same seats every week. And so by doing this, it helps students to get to know some different people in the course as well, in their courses and other students. Part of this is using that discussion board. And sometimes I know that, there's some memes that go around about discussion boards, like, oh, there's one that says, Joe posted 2 + 2 = 4. And then my response is, wow, Joe, that is really insightful. I love how 2 + 2 = 4. That is just really so true. So sometimes we get this idea that discussion boards can be very surfacey, and they can. It's all about how we design those prompts and really ask what we ask of students. So if we're asking questions that only have one right answer, but somebody answers it and there's really not much more we can discuss about that. So what is good is to think about what kind of questions that we're asking students. Maybe pop a case study in there and ask for their different perspectives. Maybe have them go out I did a course once in integrated communications, and I had students go out, take pictures of different marketing messages that they saw in different formats for companies and bring that back into the discussion board and post it, and then other students can comment. So there was a lot of variety in different ways. So we're getting some of that collaboration between students. I've also had where, they may post one thing and then I don't just say, hey, respond to 2 students. I say, you know what, when you respond to 2 students, evaluate evaluate their response from 3 different perspectives. You could also bring in additional resources that helps highlight this. So I give them instructions on how those response posts are supposed to work. So, but it's a really good way to kind of get students communicating and connecting with each other. So there's several discussion formats, and let me pop down. I'm going to pop this in I'm doing a lot of popping apparently. I am going to put some links into the chat for you. Give me just a minute and I'll do that. This is, so we have the discussion board in Blackboard. I like that still. I like it because students have to do a little bit of thinking. It helps them with their writing ability. It helps students who may be a little bit shyer, they're more comfortable with writing. So that's definitely a valid approach. You can also use VoiceThread and Flipgrid. And what's nice about those 2 features is that students can record quick videos, so they can record what they're thinking and kind of record a response to a prompt that you've given, and then students can give feedback on that. They can do it either written or they can also reply with a video. So those are some ways that might be getting some really fun interaction, but it's also creating, again, those more channels for people just to establish that social presence in the course. So that is a way that you could approach that as well. And so we do have information on our Keep Teaching site about that, as well as those links. And there's a couple workshops I know on VoiceThread that you can watch or attend. One of the things we look at too is creating kind of that social presence, and I feel like this also can overlap with the cognitive presence, is that we can incorporate collaborative learning. And there's 4 different premises of collaborative learning. It's the respect for students and belief in their potential for success. So, it's expectation theory that we know that they can live up to a certain expectation with that. The idea that learning is social. It is something that requires some connection to help forward, that it's getting multiple viewpoints in there and not just your own. It's an active, constructive process that people are working together to create meaning in the course. And in this idea that collaborative learning, faculty facilitate learning instead of just delivering information. So again, that's part of establishing that social presence in the course, is that it's that active learning idea that we're bringing students in, not to just be recipients, but they're actually participate in their learning. And so there's different ways that we can do this. I like this quote from, it says that collaborative learning combines 2 key goals: learning to solve problems in the company of others, and sharpening one's own understanding by listening seriously to the insights of others, especially with those with different backgrounds and life experiences. So as we're developing this collaborative learning, I think that's a lot of what we're trying to do, whether we're using discussion boards or maybe we're breaking them up into smaller learning teams to solve a certain problem. It's getting those different viewpoints and making people are heard and facilitating that discussion. It's getting kind of deep into that. So what you may want to do, I know that kind of the standard for discussion boards is like a weekly turnaround. Maybe spread that out a little bit to get deeper in some of those conversations. So maybe you have a level 1 and then you have some prompts that you encourage students to go deeper in that as well. But it's just that idea of, is there certain problems we can give them to solve? Can we incorporate some of what's happening right now, depending on your courses? So I think that even like, how are they solving the studying from home situation? How are they finding time to concentrate? How are they finding a quiet room? How are they balancing all of these new things along with having family around them, if they have, or friends or whoever that they are kind of sheltering in place with? So having them to help collaborate on that, even in the introduction post, is a way to kind of make that connection and helping them to start solve problems, and it creates that social presence. And collaborative learning doesn't have to mean team learning. So you guys may have seen this. I'm going to go ahead. This is a choir, and I'm going to share something. Their concert got canceled, and they they were not able to have their concert. So what happened is each one of them individually recorded this, and then it was all put together to make one complete whole. So I'm going to play just a little bit of it. Okay, so that was just kind of a quick idea on how can we maybe do some collaborative type of learning, but it doesn't mean it has to be a team assignment. So it's something that we can assign individuals to, and being able to help them, do individual pieces that come together to bring something cohesive together at the end, a cohesive project. There was one of my classes that I had to push online really quickly too. I had one of the alternate assignments I had for them was that I didn't record a lecture. What I did is I posted some key slides, some key topics and key slides, and then I asked the students to go out and look for resources. They got to choose what was kind of interesting from them from those slides, and then go out and find resources, whether it was a journal article, whether it was a video, whether it was some practical application they saw maybe in the news. They were able to, I asked them to go find that. They came back and posted that into a discussion thread, and then they explained why they chose the topic and how the resource helped illuminate that particular topic for them, or help them increase their understanding. And then I had students respond. Yes, Therese, sorry. I sometimes the chat can be a little distracting because it'll pop up, and so sorry I trailed off. But yes, Teresa, I will definitely email the links for VoiceThread and Flipgrid for you with that. So I will be sure to do that in the follow-up email. But going back to that collaborative learning, so they each kind of went and got resources, and then they discussed them among each other about like what worked, and then I was able to kind of do a recap and kind of add some shading and meaning to anything that maybe needed to be fuller. So it was something that it goes back to that principle that I do believe that they can expand their learning, and I have confidence in them. And I liked how they brought those connections together with that. So that's just one example. If you do have teamwork and it's something that is important to the course, and how we're doing that, it can be more challenging online because of the technology and the fact that even though we had set classes and we may be keeping those, students may some of them may have difficulty getting onto that schedule. They may not have the access to a high-speed internet. Or even if they do, it may not be working at a particular time. So it's just something to keep in mind that we may have to alter some of our expectations with that. And teamwork is hard enough to coordinate when you have face-to-face classes, and it's definitely doable, and I do it quite frequently in online courses, especially for the ones that, part of the work is learning about how teams function. You have to do something with teams to be able to evaluate that. So some ideas with that is to call them teams and not groups, do some type of team contract, and really have them be open and honest about what their capabilities are and what they're able to do. So it may be that somebody doesn't have internet connection, and I had one of my students who drove to a McDonald's and sat in the parking lot. She was keeping social distance to be able to connect on their Wi-Fi to be able to send information. So obviously she wasn't free all times of the day to be able to do that. She was able to use her phone for some things, but we just have to really be cognizant of what is available to our students. And I would say in this case, I added that line of don't leave it up to the students to coordinate alone. So what you may want to do is really come up with some ideas on ways that they can coordinate, kind of establish with each group, if you're using group work, how they will connect in the communication. I would even put in, I added this as well, put in multiple assignments or multiple deadlines as part of building towards whatever that team project is, so they can actually scaffold their progress. So you're not kind of leaving the project management up to them. Maybe you kind of become the project management there, manager there, just to kind of help them stay on target, because coordinating is just going to be difficult in this. Also, if you're using those teamwork, focus on the process. What's happening with that teamwork? What's going on? How are they working together? What kind of group norms are they setting up? So have them think through that as well. And then you may also want to think about creating individual responsibilities that contribute to a whole. So just kind of like that illustration of the choir who had individual assignments that came together, or the example of the course where they're going out and doing individual research and then bringing it together to kind of bring meaning to that. Maybe you can think of ways within that team assignment how every person can have their own separate function in a sense, or to bring that together, but something that won't stop the whole. So maybe you overlap that a little bit. And I realize that that's not 100% the way we want teams to function, but it's coming back to that idea of how are we doing this when we are teaching in times of disruption like it is now. We haven't had time to think through all of the different ways and the challenges of these online teams. So if you're using that, again, I just come back to that flexibility and grace too, and then communicating frequently with the teams just to see how they're doing. So those were some ideas on creating student community. We've talked about creating our faculty presence. So let's talk about cognitive presence. And so many of you, you've already gone through, you knew what you were using, your materials. This really talks about the content that we're developing as faculty. You've thought through that. You've got content. Your challenge now is how do you put it online? And possibly is there alternate content that you can develop or find quickly? So I'm just going to kind of go through some ideas on that how do we create and select this content? And that cognitive presence is helping learners share those multiple perspectives to help them develop knowledge and construct knowledge. It is a lot about that communication and critical thinking and collaborative reflection. So, how do we translate that into that online course quickly in this? So I kind of focus this section more on the facilitation of engagement with the course content. So how are we helping students connect with it? How are we helping students make meaning of that? And so one of the things is kind of just simple is how do you organize the course content? So I think, there's a lot of, and it's, I think for teaching remotely now, I think it's a great thing that, you are dividing it up into types of things, like here's where you go to find the lectures and here's where you find the assignments. I would encourage you, if you're separating it by content type like that in there you put clear dates or topics information so they all align. So if you have, a lecture that you're giving on March 27th and there's lecture slides that you want, make sure you label them well. And then if there's something connected with them, if students are supposed to have a discussion board, make sure that you are, whatever you're using as labels, you're repeating that in that. So if you're talking a discussion board and you want them to review the recorded lecture from March 27th, make sure that whatever you call that in the discussion board prompt is that you've actually, that's what you've labeled your file in underneath the lecture folder. Another way that you might think about doing it is just a weekly organization. So from week to week, you can put everything you want them to accomplish in that week, whether it's reviewing lecture, whether it was reading a particular thing, participating in a discussion board, turning in a particular assignment. So it just kind of helps students go with the flow on that, and just be able to kind of keep pace and kind of look ahead as to what's going on. When I organize like this, I also, if there's big projects, if it's a big final project, I make sure that I put notices in these folders early to say, hey, remember, you should be starting this project by now. You should be, this far on this project if you've gotten your rough draft done and that kind of thing. So those are just kind of ideas. But the thing is, We want students to be able to get in and get to the content that we have and not be confused by how to get there. So just coming up with a clear organization schema will help them to be able to do that. One of the things too, as we're transitioning and going to teaching remotely, we need to focus on the core concepts and the ultimate learning objectives. So we kind of had our plan for the course, and then we realized that, you know, it may be difficult to transition everything that we wanted to lecture about or we were doing in a particular class online. So as you're trying to manage your own time, you're managing multiple classes, students are managing multiple classes, really go back to what is core. What are the most important things in your course? What are the most important elements in terms of learning? And how do we help students get to those? Are there ways that, so if there's things that, were nice to have, but not part of the core, not necessarily closely related to learning objectives, really consider why you had these in the course and if they should kind of survive this jump to online in that sense. Definitely you're not changing the rigor of something, but it's just you're just sharpening your focus, I would say, in that. So just make sure that your focus is really sharp on those learning objectives. Also think about maybe there's some ways to give them practice to be able to do the assessments that we have, that scaffolding idea. I have a course that students do a SWOT analysis on an organization's culture. And in my face-to-face version of the class, I give them some time to filter through what a SWOT analysis is and how it's focused on org culture, not just, a general SWOT analysis, which a lot of what my business students want to go to, but really honed in on the culture of an organization. It's hard for them to kind of grasp. So I do that in my face-to-face class. I give students discussion time, and then I have them start to brainstorm, and then I go and give feedback. So initially what I had done in my online course, I had given like a little questionnaire to help them. I thought that would do it. They were still having a hard time focusing, so what I actually did for future classes is I built in a discussion board that they would kind of brainstorm ideas about what is considered a strength in organizational culture, what is considered a weakness, what can be opportunities, and through all of that. And by doing that, I was able to kind of help guide their thinking and keep it focused on org culture, and they were able to achieve that final assessment of that SWOT analysis for their own organization much better because of that. So think of some ways that you might be able to do that for your students. And then we've talked about discussion board quite a bit, but just focusing on that deeper, getting into that deeper discussion. In some of this, if you are, I know a lot of folks are doing synchronous lectures, and that's great. If that's something, you can keep up and it's working. If you're finding that maybe that's not working for you, you may want to look at some ways that you can do it asynchronously. So there may be some options that you can post recordings of yourself. If you don't have time for that, that's where I look to maybe finding materials. So maybe you'll decide to do synchronous sessions once a week and you have other resources for them to review that they can kind of fit into your schedule that way. So if that's something you're doing and you're like, I don't know that I can record all of my lectures, get them broken up and captioned and all that kind of fun stuff, there are other things that you can find as resources. So we do have the LinkedIn Learning that has, depending on what you're looking for, some courses and things that might align with what you're doing. We also have the LibGuides. The NIU library has things for open education resources, so these are free of use. Just pay attention to what the accreditation guidelines are for them. But these open education resources, if you go to that link and scroll down, you're able to find maybe some resources that are already created in your subject area. And I know there's subject matter experts that can help you with that. Or if there's these are just articles and videos that you can kind of have a collection for them to review. That might be a way to not only help you as you're working through that content, but also, as you're trying to put all this content online, but also to bring multiple perspectives into your classroom as well. So those are just some thoughts on that. When you can, allow student choice to help get them involved in the process. So, and I talk about focusing on content versus the format. So in one of my classes, I had a presentation, was the final project, and one of the final projects. And so our last day of the course, students were going to give these presentations. So it was a way that I used the presentation format because I wanted them to be able to share ideas and what they had learned with each other. And that was kind of a simple way that everybody could hear what everybody was doing. Transitioning to the online environment made it kind of challenging because, again, I don't know where students' technical abilities were to be able to record and do that. And really, when it came down to it, the format of the assignment wasn't important, it was the content. So what I did is I provided choice for the students. So I also didn't know how far they were along in developing this, and I didn't want to derail students who had already put together their slide decks and were already far along in the project and say everybody should turn in a paper instead. So what I did is I gave them choices. They could write a paper, they could, do their presentation and put scripts in the notes, or they could do like a voiceover or a video, and then they would share that on discussion boards. So, and then I assigned students to review 2 of their fellow students. So they were still, I didn't anticipate that they would review and read everything that students did, but they were still getting some of those ideas from other people. And there was still that translation, but then I gave them that final format. I gave them control over that, so that would be what would work best for them. Kind of shows their personality as well. So in line with that too, you may want to be able to foster that student connection and have them share in the decision making for the course. In another course, I also had these big group presentations, and so what I did is I worked with each group to talk about, we talked as a class, how do we best want to do this and what's the easiest way? And so we kind of negotiated, not negotiated, but I solicited input from them as to what's the best final format for them, what's going to work for all the teams. So they had input as to what would work for all of them. I wasn't having students trying to meet when we were doing this social distancing, so it worked out really well for that course. You may also want to create maybe like a social lounge, have a discussion board that's just kind of dedicated to stuff that's not specifically course related, but a little bit more personal, or even a Facebook group or something like that. So that might be a way that you can have that connection, and that would probably go more I should have put that probably more in the student connection area, but again, it's just giving them an outlet. I actually shortened this presentation from the last time I did it, and it's still ending up a little bit longer than I anticipated, but I just have all these ideas apparently. So other things that with this cognitive presence, with being online, I do this in my face classes too, because I don't know where everybody is, and I think I don't want students just kind of echoing back. I want them to really pay attention to their learning process in this. So I use reflection both in my face-to-face and my online classes. I think it's a really good way, particularly online. It's another way that you can create not only connection with the cognitive aspect and that cognitive presence, but also with you, is giving them opportunities for reflection on their learning, doing journals. You're able to see kind of what they're understanding, how they're learning, and being able to give them suggestions. And so I've got some reflection questions. I'm actually going to send you that as well. You'll get a document with information about that, just gives you some ideas on how you could set up reflection for the course. So that was kind of everything. I guess I wouldn't quite call it a nutshell, but it was kind of like a good chunk of information coming at you today about these 3 different presences in terms of the community of inquiry. If you want to learn more about this humanizing, we do have a workshop tomorrow. It's with an outside person, but it's free and open to the public. Michelle Pacansky-Brock was somebody who came and spoke at our online teaching symposium, and she got really good reviews for that. She's just really kind of focused on this humanizing online courses part. So that's available tomorrow as well if you're interested. There are my references. And then just a reminder at our Keep Teaching site. So if you have questions, we've got those workshops. We've got a support hotline. You can do one-on-one consultations. And our last few minutes, I will hang out for a while, but I wanted to also open it up. Do you have any questions or thoughts on all this? I know this wasn't a typical one. I had just a lot of information flying at you. But were there any thoughts or ideas you wanted to pursue a little bit more? Any questions that you have? Anything that maybe you felt didn't get answered? Feel free to put it in the chat or raise your hand. And if not, I will hang out here for a while. So if anybody has questions, but I do want to respect your time. I know that you are juggling 1,000,000,001 things. So if you need to leave, feel free to go ahead. And thank you for being here today. Thank you for everything. Thank you for all that you're doing and all the hard work you're doing for your students too. So you guys have a great day. Thank you, Melissa. Take care, everybody. Oh, did it not come through? You shouldn't have. You should have been able to hear it like I did. I will send the link for the choir too, just so you can do that. So you can hear that later. Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. I will also be sending the recording out to everybody. I don't think so. So I know there's been a little bit of, I'm not sure if for the folks who are still here, were you able to hear the choir singing? That might give us an idea, Teresa. But I think sometimes there's just with so many people using Collaborate, we've had a little bit of issues with audio every now and then. So that might have been it too.